Welcome to the Old Ways for the New Age podcast, where we weave the threads of traditional living into the tapestry of modern day life. I'm your host, Hannah, and I'm a naturopath, herbalist, and passionate plant lover here to discuss topics such as daily ritual, intentional living, witchcraft, herbal astrology, plus sharing interviews with inspiring guests, and so much more. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a podcast review if you enjoy my content. I wish to honour and express my deepest gratitude to the traditional custodians of the unceded land on which I live and record, the Wanjerabara people. I want to acknowledge their elders, past, present and emerging, and their continued connection to the land, sea and community. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Old Ways for the New Age podcast. My name is Hannah and today I have the extraordinary good fortune of speaking with Mikailah Rachael. Mikailah Rachael is a hereditary witch, a soul astrologer and a transpersonal therapist experienced in oracular traditions and ritual arts. Her private sessions embody ancient practices in a contemporary form to support people through the planetary cycles and ultimately empower their lives with a love of magic and transformation. Mikailah Rachael lives on a sacred mountain, here with me, in Australia, and walks the Indigenous rainforest whilst pursuing academic studies in cultural anthropology and following her passion of traditional witchcraft and ethnobotany. So welcome, Mikailah Rachael. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you chatting with me.
Thanks, Hannah. Hi, everyone.
And I first wanted to just clarify for people, you've had a bit of a name change. You're going through a transition and a transformation of your own at the moment. So we'll be referring to you as Rachael throughout the rest of the podcast. Would you like to explain that a little bit?
Sure. So, Rachael is my birth name. And many years ago, in my late 20s, when I was going through a progressed pulsamic moon and my Saturn return, my first Saturn return, I was initiated and given a spiritual name of Mikailah. However, last year, on the solar eclipse in 2024 on the 8th of April, the solar eclipse in Aries was to the exact degree of my rising sign. And I know that if you're new to astrology, this may not sort of hold much significance, but for those astro lovers, to have a solar eclipse to the exact degree on your ascendant means that there's an opportunity for rebirth. And there was a experience that I went through where I knew that it was a rebirth, a new chapter, as a menopausal witch, as a wise woman, and it was important because the eastern gateway of your chart that holds your rising sign and your ascendant is the eastern gateway into which your soul incarnates into this lifetime. And so to have a solar eclipse happen on that exact degree, I was experiencing a rebirth and a return to using my birth name, a reclamation. And it was a full circle, one of the most incredibly divine shamanic soul retrieval experiences I have been through. And I was reclaiming all aspects of myself, because your rising sign, your ascendant sign, interchangeable terms, actually governs the first house of self and self-identity. So it was truly quite a mystical experience that I went through.
Sounds incredibly powerful.
Hence the transition to my business was and is Star Witch Astrology, and I've been known for many, many years as Mikailah the Star Witch, but now, of course, I'm transitioning to Rachael, and I have transitioned back to using Rachael, my birth name, but it's just a little bit betwixt and in between for many individuals that have previously known me.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing that. And it makes a lot of sense too, because astrology is such a core part of what you do and your offerings. And I definitely want to touch on that as well. But For those who are new to your work, because you've mentioned people know you as Star Witch Astrology, which is your Instagram handle. If people want to go find you right now while they're listening to this, they can do that. But for those who are completely new to what you do, I'd love it if you could share also a little bit about your path into witchcraft and even astrology, and kind of how your ancestral lineage has influenced your practice as well.
Sure. So last year, it all centered around the solar eclipse that was on my Aries ascendant. And I've been known for many years as an astrologer, which, of course, I have a great love for astrology as an esoteric occult art. But what I was realizing was out in social media land, there's so much focus on identification,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to come back to my ancestral roots. And I have always been a witch. And when I talk about witchcraft, I know that the terminology, the word witch, has gone through quite a renaissance out in social media land. And whilst there is a renaissance happening, and yes, all women can be witches, I understand the sentiment behind that. However, I have followed the craft of being a witch for decades. So, yes, many beautiful individuals can claim the word witch, but I'm referring to witchcraft as a craft and a deep honouring of following that craft,
Mm-hmm.
like a discipline, a mastery of the craft, and it's embedded in my bloodline and my ancestral bloodline. So, I do come from a line of wise women, and through my mother, my daughter as well, and my grandmother read the tea leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, not everyone can track back their lineage, and we don't need to either, because sometimes our genealogy can't be tracked back. We don't know
Yeah.
what the women were doing, or on the patrilineal line as well. But somewhere back there, we know back in the generations back that there would have been wise women, witches, herbalists, folklorists. I'm a great folklorist and traditionalist in the sense that we are close to the earth and we work with the magic of the land. And when I teach in my online cauldrons, I do say to beautiful folk, look, you may not know the name of your great-great-grandmother, you may not know your great-great-grandfather, but go back, you would have some indication of where they come from, the country, the
Mm-hmm.
landscape, and for example, my kin come from Great Yarmouth in Norfolk in England. And so, look at, are they, when you know the location geographically of where your ancestral lines come from, look at, are they forest folk? Are they river people? Are they coastal dwellers?
Mm-hmm.
Are they sea folk? And once you identify the location, if they're forest dwellers, what are the trees that grow in that location? What are the plants, the herbs, the wildlife? So you may not necessarily get to connect in with your actual foremother, but you can learn about the landscape of where they come from.
Mm-hmm. That's a really beautiful way to put it, and that really resonates with me because I don't know, I don't have a great lot of knowledge about my ancestors, but that makes a lot of sense to me for people to be able to start working with their lineage and kind of where they're coming from. And in a recent episode that I did with Jen Campus, she is also a folklorist, and we were discussing sentiments around that and how we may not know where we're coming from, but we were talking about also when people say that they're I guess the term folk is quite loaded these days. I've seen people getting a bit upset about using the term folk to describe a practice or to describe, anything really, because they're saying, that's referring to kind of, which isn't even necessarily true, but referring to kind of indigenous practices and, what folk are you coming from? So we clarified that on my episode with her and talked about how, her ancestors were Germanic in origin, Germanic and Celtic, and that really influences her work. So where is your lineage from, Rachael?
So I've got several lineages, like many of us do.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I mentioned, one of my lineages is in Norfolk in
Mm-hmm.
England, Scottish, Stirling in
Okay.
Scotland,
Yeah.
and I also come from the north of Ireland,
Okay. So
from
definitely a very Celtic roots.
Antrim, yes.
Yeah.
And then there is a connection to Italian folklore as well.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Okay, so there is a mixture there, and I went through an incredible ancestral remembering. So this has been part of my personal journey, and I understand about how words are loaded, and I'm really quite strong on now for myself personally over the last few years, really coming back home to myself, to my ancestral roots.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through a period for myself to only use tools or practices that were part of my ancestral
Mm-hmm.
lineage
Yeah. I'm
rather
right there
than
with you.
borrowing from other cultures. And this was just something personally I embarked on for myself, and I found it so valuable with my ancestral rites to be able to work with medicine tools,
Mm-hmm.
herbs, and even coming down to the words and the practices that I used for myself.
Yeah, I think that's really important for people to take the moment to really feel into themselves and spend time with that question of what actually feels good and what we're allowing ourselves to be influenced by in the greater world. There's a lot of different opinions about what's okay and what's respectful and what's even right for each and every one of us. And so having a moment to really ponder the question and think about that for you specifically and what resonates is really important. And what I love how this has come up with you and Jen is actually an anthropologist and you're currently studying anthropology, and I think that deeper understanding of people and the way that cultures have developed and the way that they have grown and over time really lends itself to that deep respect and honoring of everybody's ancestral past and a connection with our ancestors as well. So that's really beautiful. And so let's talk about witchcraft because obviously, you were Mikailah Star Witch, a Star Witch Astrology. Witchcraft is such a part of what you do. It's something that I find so interesting about you and why I really wanted to speak to you because I do find it kind of difficult to find witches who are also doing, working with herbs in like a deeper way and rather than just in spellcraft, because I believe you do work with plants as medicines as well. And then, working with the astrology, kind of similar approaches to me. And so I'd love to know how you defined the ancestral witchcraft and what sets it apart from other kind of eclectic practices.
I'm trying to stay away from what sets things apart.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
I think we've got all different expressions. I would say that I'm an eclectic witch.
Mm-hmm.
I've been trained in different areas of witchcraft through my studies. I'm 55, so I'm a menopausal woman now. And so my perspective and my outlook has changed significantly in the last 5 years since I've stopped my blood cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trained in different elements of witchcraft in my early 20s. And I have always followed the witch's year, the 8 Sabbats.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so along the way, I have explored different path workings and just woven my own. I find that being out in nature and following the seasonal cycles, rather than performative magic or ceremonial magic, have I don't really participate in group rituals at all.
Yeah.
I follow a solitary, eclectic pathway as a witch in deep honouring of the ancestors of the land, the ancestors of the sky and the earth and the stars. And I've always been a daughter of the plants, so I'm not a herbalist.
Mm-hmm.
I work with herbs and plants in that they speak to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a strong connection with the Davic spirits. So
Mm.
tree spirits, spirits of the plants. I grow them, I let them talk to me. So I use them in that way in magical rites and spells.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's where I have a deep, deep love of the plants.
Yeah.
And we can grow them whether we live out in rural areas or in the city. Like when I
Mm-hmm.
lived in the city, I would be growing my plants and pot plants on the sill and still talking to them and working with them.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of that. I always like to tell people, even if it's just one tiny little pot on a windowsill, we can all grow something. You know, I guess we could also go gorilla seed something, but
Yeah.
they grow so wonderfully in pots, and a lot of my favorite plants that grow so beautifully are in pots even now.
Yes.
So um, definitely, there's always a way to connect with the plants. And
And mm,
you go.
oh, I was going to say what I love about the plants, even though I'm not a qualified herbalist and I don't prescribe, obviously, but for example, before I was perimenopausal, I could never grow sage.
Oh,
As soon as I hit perimenopause, suddenly I could grow sage
mm,
prolifically.
mm-hmm.
So that's how I sort of work with the plants, with because we're here on beautiful Tamborine Mountain in Wanjirabara country, is that I find it fascinating the plants or the herbs that I can grow very easily, and then other herbs I can't grow.
Yeah.
Mugwort is one of my all-time allies,
Mm-hmm.
and she's been with me a very long time, and so she is an ancestral herb for me as well. So whenever I teach or share in online cauldrons, I always invite people to find the plant spirit or the botanical ally that is there to support them throughout the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can grow that plant and commune with that plant, and obviously it's different to work with the leaves, to the flowers, to the roots
Yeah.
as well. And quite often I'll be guided by plant spirits in my dreams
Mm-hmm.
as well. So it's it's a beautiful binding that I'm bound to earth. Even though I work with astrology, I'm very much a daughter of the earth, a daughter of the plants.
Yeah, I love the way you've put that. And plants have so many different ways to get our attention, but definitely the ones that grow around you that pop up. I know, like for example, when I first moved here, I was just getting into chickweed for some reason, and I often find it works like that. And I go, oh, I just get this herb in my head, and I'm like, oh, I can't get out of my head. And then I start to go, I wonder if it grows around here. And that year, it popped up, and I'd never, like, I'm sure it had grown around me before, but I'd never seen it, and it popped up right in front of me, and I saw it, and I was able to identify it, and that was so cool. And then I started on a journey with that. At the moment, I'm on a journey with sweet violets,
Oh,
which uh
incredible.
yeah, I just felt led, and I planted a plant, and it started to grow, and it flowered, and I tried to grow it before, grow them before, and I hadn't had much success. And it was only after falling pregnant and having my son that violets started to grow perfectly for me. And I was having a few bouts of mastitis, and I was just in my head, it just popped into my head, I should Google, kind of learn more about sweet violets. And they are perfectly indicated for mastitis and any kind of blockages, hardenings, anything to do with the lymph and that inflammation. And it just makes perfect sense that they were there ready for me. And so I've just made my first batch of sweet violet oil. But
Oh, how
um,
divine.
yeah, it's so special. And the plants really show up for us in that way. And I think how we can optimize that relationship and kind of grow that relationship is by just working on that observational practice and that connection with the world around us, so that we actually see, you know.
Absolutely. And going for a walk in your neighbourhood, it doesn't matter whether you're in the city or out. Like, we're so blessed we have the rainforest. I mean,
mm,
I've got wild native violets that grow,
mm,
and I love it when they come up because obviously they're sacred to Venus. So I love wild harvesting them on Friday, which is a day that's sacred to Venus.
mm-hmm.
And then if you want to get into the planetary hours of when you wild harvest, but also I just love following my intuitive guidance
Yes.
and picking the wild native violet flowers and then creating a bowl of sacred water from the springs that we have and floating the violets in the water and keeping that bowl by your bed at night time when you dream, and using it as a oracular dreaming pond or pool, so
Oh,
that we may not necessarily be able to um, you know go to the oracular temples that used to exist, but we can create our own rituals and practices to connect in with the egregore, which is an occult term of connecting into the collective ethers of all the healers, the herbalists, the wise women, the priestesses, the soothsayers that
mm,
have gone before us, that would um, celebrate and wild harvest plants, use them medicinally, use them magically, and that's where the emphasis of what I teach through astrology, I'm not your typical astrologer, is
mm-hmm.
that I've brought astrology under my witchcraft. So rather
Mm,
than astrology out here, which was part of the rebirth, I recognized that I needed to really do a deep honoring of my ancestral bloodline, but also my spiritual ancestry, and bring astrology under this with my spell crafting as a witch. First and foremost, I was a witch first and foremost before I was an astrologer,
mm-hmm.
and the egregore of the collective resonance of all of those who've gone before us that have followed this mystical, magical path have looked up to the moon and the stars and the plants, and they've held those magical portals, and the oracular priestesses who have followed these rituals, we are part of this. So when you do these rituals and these rites, you're connecting into all of those who have gone before us, and that just makes my heart sing, especially if you can pass some of this on to your children as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That sounds incredible. And I have a lot of little native violets blooming in my yard at the moment. And I 100% want to try that. That sounds incredible. And that's why I was so excited to talk to you and to finally get to meet you. We actually met in person recently for the first time, because a lot of your practices really resonate with me, and kind of the way that I approach magic and the way that I approach my own witchcraft. And I became, I guess I started on my witchcraft journey when I was 15. So it's half my life. I'm 30. So half my life I've been, studying, I guess, the occult arts, of studying witchcraft, paganism, and everything to do with that. And I was a witch before I was a herbalist, and I was a witch before I started to, I guess, began on my astrology journey, because I'm still relatively a little baby astrologer. So I don't at all pretend to be an expert in that realm yet, but it's something that I'm working on. And so, yeah, I just love the way that you look at the relationship between plants and stars and your witchcraft path, and just our own human nature as well, which is really beautiful. And being able to take that a little bit from, I get a little bit of like the psychological astrology from you. I get a little bit of like that folklore and that, I guess, looking toward the ancient peoples as, as to what their practices were like with the oracular traditions and things like that. So that sounds absolutely beautiful. And I know that our listeners are definitely going to be looking for native violets in their yard. Um, and so I'd love to know, you mentioned kind of your studies in witchcraft and how there's a few branches of those studies that you practice with in regards to kind of earth-based spiritual traditions. But I'd love to know kind of, you've mentioned to me the lunar, stellar, and earth-based branches of your own practice. So could you touch on those and what they mean to you, what that actually means in your practice?
Absolutely. So obviously, Lunar is following the lunar cycles,
Mm-hmm.
and this was my first exploration and initiation in my late 20s. I had to teach myself because this is going back to the 90s. And you've heard me say this story when we met, is that back then I had done some training in England, but when I returned to the Southern Hemisphere, there weren't any books written by Southern Hemisphere writers at
No.
that time in the early 90s. Okay.
Mm.
So, I was born 1970, so just to get a gauge, it's really important to understand about generational
Definitely.
timelines. And that's when, in the Southern Hemisphere, I had to go out and become a moon tracker. And so I literally had to go out and track the moon, the cycles of the moon, the waxing, the waning, the different phases. And that's when I was also working with my sacred blood. So returning my blood to the earth, following the lunar magic, understanding about how the waxing and the waning affects us differently with the ebb and flow of the tides. And that was my initiation. And I hadn't even started really studying astrology then.
Mm-hmm.
I was practicing the witch's year, the eight sabbats, transposing them from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, being a seasonal green witch. I'd done that for many, many years, and then I was incorporating lunar magic in the sense of starting to go to my first women's circle, and this was like going inland on the full moon. And the first moon lodge I ever sat in, I had to follow a pathway, an actual physical pathway, because back then we didn't have mobile phones, there was no GPS, there was no maps.
Yeah.
And following through this forest path, and then I will never forget this. It was night time, the full moon was out, there was this magnificent teepee, and we finally found it. And we pulled back the teepee door, and there was a circle of 50 women, and these were very
Wow.
old, wise women, and they were sitting in a spiral. The fire was in the middle with a big cauldron full of herbal tea, but they had all crystals and everything around, and that was my first ever woman's moon lodge. It was
Oh my
unforgettable.
goodness.
And it took hours because every woman shared her story and where she was in her menstrual cycle or if she was menopausal. And that had such a profound effect on me that I went on to teach lunar magic, moon magic, the cycles. I did lunar fertility reports for many years for a naturopath. And it really was the start of it all.
Wow.
Learning about the moon phases. So I'm a really big one for experiential embodied astrology as well,
Mm-hmm.
because because I didn't have any books teaching me. So I love books, I love learning. I've got a stellium in Gemini. But as you know from hearing me talk, I'm really big on actual tracking the moon and understanding the moon. So going out and looking at the moon and just feeling that ancient moon wisdom that many, many witches and midwives and herbalists and cunning magical folk have danced underneath the moon in many sacred rituals on many different lands. And the moon also governs our ancestry and our spiritual soul essence. And so I'm on my own pilgrimage to go back to, I wouldn't even say Celtic, I would say to Scotland or to the north of Ireland to actually learn myself now from Irish witches,
Yeah.
Scottish wise women, to actually teach me about the craft of where my ancestors came from and to use the right terminology. That's my own personal pilgrimage, and it's also why I love studying cultural anthropology.
Yeah.
So that's lunar magic for me. It's a great place to start to look at the moon in your chart, but to follow the moon, write with the moon, create magic with the moon, work with lunar botanicals. She governs dreaming. I've always been fascinated in the ancient dream temples.
And I think that lunar magic and that practice of observing and working with the moon is so accessible for everybody. So,
It is,
you know, you just have to
absolutely.
go outside. You can be anywhere, you can be anyone, and you can start to learn just by observing the moon
That's
every
right.
day, you know, every night. I know that's something you encourage every day, just going out and having every evening having a little peep to see what's going on. And you know, you could always keep a journal, or you could, you know, record it somehow so that you can kind of keep track of your observations. But that is just something that, you know, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, pretty much all of us can even get to a window just to observe the moon, you know.
That's what I love. It's universal. It's not for a select few. It's part of everybody's birthright. No matter
Yes.
if you're male, female, it doesn't matter. It's everybody's birthright. And I
Thank you
love
for
that.
sharing that. Yeah, I think that's going to be very helpful. I think our audience, you know, they're often quite busy. A lot of our audience, you know, they're parents and they've got young kids, and I think that's also something that's so family friendly, and that's something I'm actually currently working on, my connection with the moon with my son now. So, you know, in the past, I've kind of been that person who's, I forget sometimes. I forget to go out and have a look because I'm busy. You know, I'm so busy. And so I'm, you know, deconditioning my busyness and, you know, working on that with him. And he absolutely loves it. He goes, moo, moo. And he can point at it and he knows exactly where it is and what it is. And that's so special. And so I look forward to that journey as well with him over the years, building
It's
on it together.
incredible. The Bella Luna. And what you've spoken into, Hannah, about the practicality is a
Mm,
beautiful segue into earth magic,
mm,
because even though I'm an eclectic witch, I'm very much what I would classify as a kitchen witch.
yes.
And this is where you can have epiphanies opening a tin of cat food. Like, and I would get a lot of insights when I was scrubbing my toilet. Like
Yeah.
I work with everyday magic,
Mm,
and I don't subscribe to a lot of pomp and ceremony and performative magic or performative rituals. I actually just follow my own solitary craft. Even just spending a minute outside under the moonlight, a moment gazing up at the stars, just walking past a flower and saying a little love prayer to the flower, going, oh, aren't you beautiful? Giving thanks to the trees, incorporating it into your everyday existence
mm-hmm.
is more important and just showing up and being honest, raw, authentic in your messiness.
Yeah.
To me, that's earth magic.
Yeah.
And even when you make a cup of tea, honour the water, stir it, put your prayers into your cup. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I found there was a ritual I loved, and I can't remember where it came from. I would love to be able to credit it properly. It was when I was reading about coffee and how it can be a feminine plant depending
Mm.
on different cultures. And it was like when you wake up in the morning with your first morning beverage, going out to the east and just holding up the cup to the east, to the place of the rising sun, giving thanks for the new day that's dawning, and just saying goodbye to the night's dreaming. And you take a sip of your morning beverage, and that acts as a intermediary ritual between the night and the day. Just something really simple. Earth magic to me is honouring the seasons, the cycles, the changes, and being connected to your living environment around you.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. And I think, you've actually sparked a little moment of epiphany in me as well. Because I mean, I still think it's a cute name, but we tend to refer to it here as casual magic. So something that you can do that is low pressure and that is, it's the stakes aren't so high. We don't need, I mean, robes are great, but you don't need a special ceremonial robe. You don't need to cast a circle, and you don't need to have a coven of people. It's things that you can do every single day. Like, I love the stirring your intentions into your beverage or your food. Or, we like to go and say hi to a paperbark tree. Every time we go on, we have this tree, and my son will wave, say hi, tree. And, those little moments of connection with the earth, and therefore with spirit and the divine, are just, I think, so foundational to a really, like embodied, holistic, grounded practice within yourself. And it really lays fantastic foundations for, building on your practice going forward, especially if you're someone who's new to the craft. I think that that's really beautiful. And so, what about the stellar witchcraft? I'd love to know more about the stellar witchcraft.
Oh, so that's obviously the star law.
Uh huh.
And so astrology, so working with the very practical art of astrology as a map, as
Mm-hmm.
a transpersonal tool. We're not dominated or dictated by the planets,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a wonderful map to understand how the archetypal energies support us through astro mythos,
Mm-hmm.
but also looking at, okay, we need a map. This is a map that's been given to us. Not everybody resonates with astrology. You don't
Mm-hmm.
need to. That's the whole point. It's just approaching life with joyfulness and knowing that human life is really messy at times and we go through the dark night of the soul, which is why I love teaching and sharing about Venus in her relationship to Inanna's descent into the
Mm.
underworld. Because that's what these planetary energies are based on, is archetypal stories, and they are embedded in different cultures, different pantheons, where we have the variations of the names, but essentially it is a universal creation myth,
Mm-hmm.
and Inanna or Ishtar is Venus, and the morning and the evening star representations hold different frequencies, and it is Venus and her relationship with the moon. So we've got the two feminine energies that guide us. But astrology came alive for me. I'm really big, as you know, learning about the craft and giving honour and respect to the craft. So there's the craft of the witch, whatever your path working is within that please give respect to the craft and those who have dedicated a lot of years to the craft.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also really big on honouring the craft of astrology and learning the techniques, the craft, like training to be a herbalist.
Yeah.
There's a
Mm.
dedication to the mastery of the craft. And I
Absolutely.
think that's getting a little bit lost in this day and age.
Mm-hmm.
Um, instant gratification. That's what concerns me, is that we're losing respect for the eldership of the medicine that's being carried. When I teach astrology, I talk about the planetary elders. So, not actual physical people, but the planetary eldership and guardianship of what's held. When we work with the plants and the trees, we're talking about the trees as elders, as our
Mm.
guardians.
Yeah.
And astrology, I still feel like I'm a baby astrologer, even though I've been studying it nearly
It's
30
so deep.
years.
It's so
It's so
deep.
deep. It's a lifetime upon lifetime upon lifetime. The
Mm.
more you think you know, the less you know, if that makes sense. It's
Absolutely.
like the eternal student. It's a lifetime love. And my absolute passion is when, because I was trained as a priestess
Mm-hmm.
and initiated as a priestess. And then I discovered astrology as well. And it was weaving my two greatest loves, because I was working with ancient priestess energies, and a lot of that was divine guidance,
Mm-hmm.
direct communion, as a channeler, as a seer, as a prophetess, as an oracle. That was my remembering of an ancestral, spiritual ancestral past life remembering, and that reigniting is what I'm passionate about, is helping people remember the ancient codes that they hold within them. So I'm an awakener, and she who remembers is part of the moon medicine, the Venus pathway of remembering the ancient ones, but for the new way forward, for the
Yeah.
new earth. And so it was when I started to weave in the feminine asteroids into astrology that I could really
Mm.
work with the rituals, the ceremonies, and weave my craft as a witch into what I would call stellar magic for myself.
Yeah.
So there's the lunar path, the lunar magic, the earth magic, where I follow the seasonal sabbats, keeping in mind that I'm relearning that. So
Mm.
unlearning
Yeah.
and relearning to do with my ancestral lands,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of information out there, and this is why I've loved coming back to academic study, is because it's about really being clear that what we're referencing and crediting does come from a place of actualization,
Yeah.
because the spiritual new age industry has to be accountable for a lot.
Mm. I mean,
Mm.
I think there's no denying that there's power in our roots, right? So, um, you know, as much as and one thing that I love about paganism and witchcraft, especially like, Celtic witchcraft, is that I've talked about how it's quite forgiving and accepting of a lot of people. And, and I do love that you can build an eclectic practice. So you can draw in parts, within reason that resonate with you within your culture, that makes sense, that is something that you want to weave into your everyday life, in your everyday practice, and all of your personal rituals. But there's also something to be said for looking at to our ancestors and the traditions that were carried out for hundreds of thousands of years before us. Because I think, especially with witch talk and all of these online spaces, there's almost a sense of entitlement that I see come into spiritual spaces where, if you channeled it, it's gospel and it's a thing where that's great and it can be true. I think definitely there's space for that, but also I don't think we should forget where we came from, and these traditions that helped us to evolve and get to where we are now. And there's a reason why those core traditions have been seen across almost every single culture. There's a reason why there's a common thread that weaves them and binds them all together, is that there's a root of truth to them, right? And there's a reason why they developed. So I really understand that and appreciate that you said that.
And traditions can be fluid too.
Mm.
Yeah. And even with my own rebinding, I've had to go through the unbinding, and I don't even know if I'd call myself a Celtic witch. It's really interesting. I've got a whole new relationship with words.
Yeah.
A lot of my writings, because I've written a lot over the years, I'm so glad I never had a particular book on the witch's year that I wrote. I had a
Right.
manuscript ready to be published. This is just a classic example
Yeah.
of all my teachings, my experiences, my learnings, and I was
Mm.
going to have it was called the Holy Book of the Witch's Year. I had the manuscript all drafted and I was going to have it published, and something kept holding me back. And
Mm.
then it's only recently that someone that I absolutely adore as the love of my life shared with me that certain practices actually go back to, say, Irish paganism and the fire festivals that come from Ireland. We're not talking Celtic,
Mm.
okay?
Yes.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I didn't publish that book, because I'd have to pull it and rewrite it, because I'm diving deeper into the
Yeah.
true roots of the ancestral line to get the terminology right. And because language,
Mm.
native language is
Yeah.
really important to me as well. So I'm learning more for myself. And this is also why I love the studies in cultural anthropology.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, and Gaelic is something on my list. I really would like to learn Gaelic. I've looked into a few courses, and there are some really cool people who offer that. So that's something that I would really love to do myself, because I think words absolutely hold power, and language holds power, and names hold power. So I absolutely agree with you there. And definitely, I mean, again, how you touched on instant gratification culture, we talked about a lot on this podcast, because I share your concerns in that regard. And I think that that's something beautiful that these kinds of traditions and practices can offer, is uh, the understanding and appreciation that not everything has to be instant. And, the importance of being able to go on a journey like that and have an open mind and an open heart to be able to learn new information and unlearn some information, and not take, I think everyone's an expert these days. But the more we could appreciate that really none of us are experts, we're all just animals trying to figure our way through, then,
Exactly.
I think we are going to set ourselves up better as a community and as a society, if we can understand that.
And I think we need to be more forgiving and compassionate with ourselves, that we can make mistakes. We're all
Mm,
learning. And it's not about shaming anybody or anything, you know.
no.
It's like, oh, okay, now I know a different perspective and I'm going to explore that. And being agents of curiosity, I think, is really important, to
Mm,
keep open, to keep learning, to be curious, to be better human beings, in accordance to listening to the voices of nature
yeah.
and listening to the voice of the lost elementals as well.
Mm. And for a moment, this is drawing back on something that you really touched on in the beginning, but for some reason I feel like I want to touch on it again. I'd love to know a bit more about your relationship with Davis. Are we talking flower Davis, all nature spirits? How does that weave into your life?
Oh, it's a very interesting question. So, again, this is what I tie in with my craft, is that, and it's not an uncommon story, but ever since I was young, a little one, I could hear the elements and the spirits of the other worlds, of the plants, of the flowers.
Mm.
I do have a relationship with the lost elementals, and a classic example is, for example, in astrology, Black Moon Lilith is, as an energetic, she's a very powerful vortex, but when we relegate an energetic to mythology, and I understand about the connection with Lilith in goddess mythology, as human beings, we love archetypal stories.
Yeah.
Okay, so I understand that. But what happened was when I communed with the energy for myself, because I don't teach anything that I haven't experienced myself, she appeared to me, this energy, for me, and we understand that human beings need names attributed to certain stories and elements so we understand. When this energy appeared to me, I was told by her that she found the connection to the mythology of Lilith, as the wild, revengeful woman say, very constraining and restrictive and limited for her. But she appeared to me as the elven queen. She said, I am the queen of the elven dynasty.
Oh.
And I'm here to share with you lost codes of our world. So that's my connection. I find it hard to articulate. I'm currently writing a book around it, though it may take many years, because these frequencies, these worlds exist around us, but because we've been so disrespectful as human beings to ecology and these other worlds, they've pulled further and further away. So there are portals and dimensions. So when I talk about the lost voices of the elementals, these are these elemental beings that exist, but they're not here in this plane, but you could go into the forest and see an opening in a tree trunk.
Yeah.
And walk through and meet them, because they're close but they're far away, but those worlds are very accessible. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I don't know if I've articulated myself very well in that.
No, it makes total sense to me. I mean, for the listeners, I guess we'll find out. But it's something that again, the episode with Jane Campus, if you haven't listened to it, I feel like you guys would get along very well. And we did touch on nature spirits in connection with home spirits as well. And I think, perhaps home spirits are a slightly different situation possibly, but definitely those, like, as you put it, lost elementals. I've always kind of, through my study and my understanding and experience, exist on a slightly different plane to us. So they're kind of alongside us, but on a different plane. And so there are all those connection points, those liminal spaces, liminal times where we're able to connect the world a little bit better. Samhain probably being one of them, midnight, doorways, windows,
Absolutely.
tree trunks.
Belfina, Midsummers.
Absolutely.
It's a play on words when I said the lost elementals, because they're not lost, we're lost.
Yes. Yeah.
We're the
And
lost elementals.
I think that's something that I'm personally very interested in, which is probably why I asked the question. It's something that I'm looking at pursuing with myself, because some people, like, have you ever seen one visually? Do you feel like yes? Okay. Most people I ask have, who walk in this kind of realm and study these things and have these experiences. I don't know 100% if I have, which probably means I haven't seen one. And my brain, I like to say, works a little differently to some, and so it's something that I'm working with. I'm always working with my brain to kind of to progress in this way, but it's something that I would really love to experience at some point. But I definitely have had experiences, and I installed a fairy door in my home. I always say this to people, and really, they decided to use it. So I went through a period of time where all my keys kept getting taken off my key ring, and I ended up with one key left. And I was like, guys, this isn't funny. It was kind of funny, but I have those experiences, and and I do like agree with you on the plane thing. That's definitely something. But just because I know a lot of beginners listen to this podcast, I like to break these down with people to see different people's opinions and what because again, we're all just learning, and so to see if there's a common idea that is across everybody's practice, to help people who maybe are completely new to paganism, to witchcraft, to any of these traditions, um, and practices, who have no idea about any of this. Maybe were raised Catholic, and this is completely new to them. I just like to get other people's ideas to help, I guess, break down that a little bit and help them to understand what we're all talking about when we talk about devas or elves or fairies or,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I suppose what we've been talking into hasn't really been elementary.
no,
Um, but also you don't have to see them, you can sense them, so clear,
mm,
sentient. And even Hannah, when you were saying you weren't sure, you may have, and I'm like, you probably have, because
okay,
that's what happens. Oh, did we just see a
the
flicker? Did
corner of
we
the
just
eye,
see,
yeah,
it's out of the corner of your eye. And what, just even coming back to starting, say, if this is something someone wants to explore, none of this needs to be complicated. It can be
mm,
really, really simple, of leaving out a bowl of an offering, um, just a libation, like on the full moon, pouring some liquid, herbal tea, water, a little bit of your wine out on the ground, and just making an offering to the elementals or
mm.
the nature spirits. Language is really, really important. Like I was going to ask you when you said you wanted to learn Gaelic, is that Scottish Gaelic? Is that Irish Gaelic?
Irish
Like,
Gaelic,
yeah,
yeah,
interesting. And that is very interesting because the Irish have a completely different view around the fairies. They are
mm.
not little winged
No.
gossamer beings. And so that's why I've sort of now learnt to observe and listen, and really go to a lot of traditional people that know what, and they've been following the craft again. It's quite fascinating learning about different cultures and
Mm.
how it's respected, but there's so much that we could talk into. We could have almost done a podcast on elemental introduction,
Well,
like
if you want to
that
do that, I will
we
totally welcome
can.
you back.
I would. I didn't realise that there's a lot of people that all these concepts are potentially new for them. So that
Mm.
might be a beautiful part two, that we can talk about really simple elemental introductions that when you're just discovering.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, a lot of our listeners, as I mentioned, are very new and are also coming from backgrounds and, I guess, cultures that this is not resonant with. Like, this is not a part of it. And so they're kind of starting on their journey and trying to figure out what sits well with them. And a lot of them are also just, again, lifelong learners who are very curious and don't necessarily agree or, practice in the way that I do, but are open minded people who are just interested in learning more. And so I guess a big focus of mine is I always want to make things accessible and understandable and approachable for people. I don't really believe in gatekeeping or, I always, and being someone who I guess is leaning towards an educator, like my whole family are teachers. That's probably where it comes from. And my background is actually in brand promotion, which is kind of funny. So talking, I had my own agency where I would educate people on ethical and independently made products that help their lives in some way. So I was very specific about what brands I worked with, but my
mm,
whole thing was education and explaining to people who'd never heard of a chia seed before what a chia seed does and why it's amazing for your body, and ways they can incorporate into their lives. And so I guess I bring that into this space now, wanting to make these spiritual concepts that sometimes can feel very I guess up in the air and very big and I guess vague in sometimes. Like sometimes we'll talk about certain words like I use this as an example a lot, but like the concept of holding space for me didn't make sense for a long time. And now I figured out a way to conceptualize that in my head where I understand it and am able to apply it in real life. But that was something that I wish somebody had been able to explain that to me sooner, instead of just hearing the word pop up a lot and go, what does that actually mean? Like, what does that actually mean?
This
Um,
is fascinating. When I did my when I did the training as a transpersonal counselor, that was one of the most profound exercises. We had an incredible lecturer, and he
mm,
said, "Okay, everyone's throwing around these terms: transpersonal, meditation,
mm,
chakra, this, that." He said, "That's not going to serve anybody." He said, "You
yes.
need to be able to explain what
Yeah.
is meditation, what is holding space." And it was such a great exercise because all of these buzzwords get thrown around, but what do they actually mean?
Mm-hmm.
And we sort of forget what it's like to bring it back to the basics, which is
Yeah.
actually the underpinning of everything, is that it doesn't need to be complicated. Bring
Yeah.
it back to the basics. I love that you set this as your intention and the emphasis on that. Mm.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And I mean, this has been so interesting hearing your background and the way that you do things. And I did want to ask, because we're talking so much about things being practical and being able to, you know, be practiced in your everyday life. I wondered if you would share kind of what a day, or, you know, I think a day is good, what a day in your life looks like when you're incorporating your practices into your flow of the day.
Well,
Do
to
you have a
be
morning
honest,
ritual?
yes, no, yes, no, yes, no.
Yeah.
But keeping in mind that I did undergo many years training.
Yes. So you've got
Okay.
that lens that you're working with, yeah.
So I have, in my 20s, late 20s, I went through quite strong initiations and trainings where I went through quite a lot of very intense rituals and ceremonies and daily practices.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they were mastered, then I could open it up. So very strong on setting space, directions, calling in, and being trained into how to hold space,
Mm-hmm.
how to set intentions, working with the fundamentals of creating ritual space. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, as I became more adept in it, then I could loosen up and flow more. Because of my training, I can call it in quite quickly now, if that
Yes.
makes sense. But I had dedicated a lot of years to respectfully learn.
Mm-hmm.
So now, and then of course, when I became a mother,
I would also love to ask you more on that in a future episode. I didn't want to touch on it today, but that's something that I also has become a focus here. Probably since I've become a mother, it's naturally
Mhm.
gravitated towards me. But being able to speak with mothers who are also herbalists, who are also witches, and how that actually looks in family life too, because that's not something that's spoken about very often.
No.
So we can touch on that later, future.
Absolutely. And to be honest, um, I didn't enforce a lot of my practices on my children because I don't know if I would change that now in hindsight. They're young adults, they're wildlings out in the world. Um, I didn't impose many of my practices because I wanted to give their souls the
Mm.
freedom of expression to find their own spiritual path workings.
Yeah.
I obviously taught them about how to walk in the rainforest and introduce themselves to the
Mm.
spirits of the rainforest. You know, Nanyanari, Mikailah, or it's saying, introducing themselves to the spirits around. Um, and of course, we had to work with their psychic gifts because children have very interesting and unique psychic medicine that may come through.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, we can certainly share about mothering in another episode if you wanted to.
Yeah. Absolutely, that would be fantastic. I think that's something we're all very interested in. And you've got so much experience under your belt as well with that. So with your kids being grown now, you've been through the whole gamut, so to speak, and
Mm.
all those different phases of their lives. But yeah, let's talk about your day. So you start with
I'm okay. So I'm more of when I get up in the morning, I'm into it. And it's
okay.
one of my most productive times is in the morning.
Uh-huh.
And then what I find is I have a very simple morning ritual, as I said, with my morning beverage,
Yep.
honoring the nighttime, ending the morning beginning. Um, I spend time with my animals. Then my work day commences, and I find that my rituals for me are more in the afternoon and in the evening.
Mm-hmm. That makes
So
sense.
I am neurospicy,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what I found was that that whole emphasis on starting the day with prayer and ritual and meditation didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that is towards the end of my day. Uh, Always spending time communing with my plants, practically out in the garden with my plants. Writing, I'm really big on writing, working with my dreams if I've had a significant dream. I do have altars set up, so I've got a lot of different little altars all around my house.
Yeah.
So quite often I'll work with lighting a candle, and I might only have a minute or two to sit in front of my altar to offer a prayer to my ancestors or call in some intention for the day. One of my strongest rituals has always been, depending on how much water we've got in the tank, I always have a morning shower. And when I'm in that morning shower, it washes away the evening, the dream space, and it resets and aligns my energetic field. I need to be in water at the start of the day.
I love that. Yeah.
And I get a lot of insights and messages come through me when I'm under running water.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's in the shower at home, a quick well, actually not a 5 minute, a minute shower, or actually going walking to the local stream or creek,
Yeah.
but it has to involve water. And I'm very practical within that. If there's some practices that I've forgotten to do, I'll do it when I used to do it when I was driving in the car.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because of the training, I could call it in very quickly,
Yeah.
you know. Um, mm,
Yeah. Amazing. And so in the evening, you probably have a few little things that you do before bed, but I love that you shared that about the shower. And everyone's so different. I don't, at this point in my life, work very much with the dream space, um, probably because I'm sleep deprived. um,
exactly. It's all
but
relative.
yeah, there's not really a lot of deep sleep happening.
Mm.
But for those people, because some people, especially if you're maybe like a Pisces or someone like that, you might really be inclined to working with dreams and in the dream space. And for those people, those folk, that makes a lot of sense, that morning shower. I've never thought about it like that to cleanse like I would do the end of the day, and I have practices that I do at the end of the day, but that morning actually to cleanse from that dream space and that dream time makes a lot of sense. So thank you for sharing that.
Or smoking, incense, resin. I'm a really big one for scrying with smoke.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And also, I really need movement and breath work.
Okay.
So, what I find is after my working day, sometimes I do yoga in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
a short half-hour practice, but definitely to mark the differentiation between my working day, which is studying or offering astrology sessions or soul jeweler sessions online. I then have to walk in the forest or I do a yoga breathwork meditation and practice. So movement, body movement, and using it as intentional ritual is really a strong part of my daily routine and ritual.
Wonderful. Yeah, and again, these are also practical in ways that people can easily uh, bring them into their days without any huge financial investment or huge investment in time. That's great just to take those moments, and again, that's a very embodied practice. All of these are very embodied practices, the physical experience of moving energy. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
That's okay. And my children, when they were growing up, they would know if I was having a really stressed day, because I'm not naturally a very easy flowing individual. I've got a
Okay.
lot of fire and air in my chart. So I'm
Uh-huh.
water is my least dominant element. So that's why I crave
Ah.
water. So sometimes you might find when you look at your chart, if there's a least dominant element, it might be the one you crave.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, but my children would know, they'd say, "Oh, you seem very stressed today, Mama. You haven't done your yoga practice, have you?" And they would send me off to do my little yoga practice
Oh, that's
and breath
amazing.
work just to clear the day. Mm.
Yeah.
It's different being a mama. It all
Yeah.
changes when you're a mama.
And I guess that's something because it's so relevant for me now. Also, I mean, my practice is very similar to yours in the way that I do work with a lot of little things through the day. So people have seen me put on Instagram, I'll put a pentagram on my pie crust, or I'll, like there's lots of
Yes.
different ways that especially hearth witchery is what I've discovered is definitely my approach. I'm a
Oh,
bit green witch
wonderful.
with the herbalist, but very hearth witch,
Mhm.
where my home is like my sacred space. My entire home is my sacred space, and and I definitely, I've always used sweeping as meditation, and so I've always
Oh,
preferred it to vacuuming. Um,
absolutely.
that's always, even in workplaces, like when I was in workplaces and I had to, I'd always say I'll sweep because that was my time to like process the day and then have a bit of a moving meditation, and that was really helpful for me. And sometimes you could say a prayer in your head, or there's lots of different things you could do with that, but um it's very similar in that way. But now adding that layer of having another person always attached to you and basically no free time, that takes these kind of everyday little practices to another level. How can I actually fit micro moments into my day, not even like a couple of minutes uninterrupted, but like how can I take a couple of seconds and really make it a sacred, couple of seconds where I'm very present for just like those 2 seconds.
Exactly. And you've touched on something that's very dear to my heart that I'm so passionate about is hedge witchery, being
Mm,
out in the wild and bringing the hedge witch into the hearth, back to the hearth. So walking out in the rainforest, collecting kindling
mm-hmm.
and bringing it back to the home. I mean, we're very lucky in our mountain homes. I've got a fire and
Yeah.
so literally I could be the hedge witch and do that ritual and that practice and walk daily and then bring it back and put the firewood that I'd gathered and put it on the fire, and that was my deep acknowledgement of hedge witchery and the hearth witch. Absolutely such deep respect and honour for the hearth witch.
Oh, yeah. It's. I read there was a book, Hearth Witchery. Is that what it's actually called? The Hearth Witch. Um, and it was such an eye-opening moment for me because I always thought, and again, what are labels really? It's just for a way for us to kind of feel like we understand something, but it's, it can be helpful because we're all trying to figure stuff out, and so I always kind of was like, well, I'm probably a bit more of a green witch because I work with plants. That's my whole, my whole thing. And I've done it. It's the only thing I've ever done is herbalism. That's my only career, really. And working with plants in different ways. But then the hearth witchery, I'm so dedicated to like my home being a sacred space, and for other people's homes, even through my naturopathic practice, we talk a lot with clients often about, you know, does your space feel good? Like, do you walk into your space and does it feel good? Do you feel safe? Do you feel settled? Does it feel like a place that you enjoy being in? And if not, what are some ways we can work with just the space that you live in to make that a place for healing, and so that's definitely, yeah, something that I'm passionate about, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for
Hestian,
sharing.
Hestian magic, it's called.
Hestian.
Hestian, Hestian,
Okay.
Hestian, Hestian magic, creating magic and ritual in your home space to feel good. Absolutely. That is probably the most fundamental way to start, is honouring the hearth fire. If you don't have a fireplace, it's the oven,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all part of the really practical magic that you can create.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. And so if people want to work with you, what have you got going on at the moment? Do you have any courses coming up? I know you're always doing something.
Yes,
How can people work with you?
I've got a great 12-month container teaching about astrology with the witch archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
That started back in April, but there's still space to join. Always the embodied Venus magic, the Venus path, which is experiential astrology, following the ancient feminine initiation rites of Venus and the moon in real
Mm-hmm.
time with sky astrology. And people can always work with me one on one with soul doula sessions, astrology, or doing private mentorship.
Beautiful. Oh, I didn't know you offered mentorship. That's amazing. And and what is soul doularing for people who don't know what that is? I
So
read your website, but just for those who are
yes.
curious.
So I'm an avid witch that works with other lifetimes,
Okay. Yeah.
other times, places, dimensions, and I work with clearing contracts and vows that
Mm-hmm.
may stop us from stepping into our true purpose and magnificence. So I work with, I suppose, what is known out there as the witch wound, of where there's been persecution themes. What
Mm-hmm.
is stopping you from stepping into your full brilliance and your magic, and what can we work with? But I go in similar to seer and work with that medicine to unbind, unhook, and clear. So, as with anything, if I speak into anything that doesn't resonate, just scatter it, because not all of this needs to resonate for individuals either.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you just follow the thread that resonates with you, that makes your heart feel alive, or you go, oh, there's magic there. I can feel it. I don't know what it is. I don't know why I'm here. I just know. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
that. It's just following that.
Yeah.
I always find it really difficult to explain what
Yes.
a soul doula session is. I tried my best describing it on the website.
Yeah. And so
Um,
people can go and find your website as well, and I'll put all of your links to your Instagram and to your website in the show notes. Is there anywhere else that people would find you?
no, not really, because I'm in
Your
the woods.
your podcast. You have a
Oh,
podcast.
my
How can we
podcast.
forget that?
Oh, yes, for magical folk. It's been a bit dormant lately. There's been a creative hiatus. And I was going to say to people, I'm currently in transition. I'm in, on this beautiful mountain, but I'm also going to be based in England for part of the year. So if there's any time zone differences, or if people want sessions or to work with me in private mentorship, you can always privately contact me and we can work out time zones, because I will be based in the southern and the northern hemisphere. For
Okay.
magical folk, it is coming back around and in, and that is also an awesome way to stay in touch and just listen to everything we've spoken into today. It will be segmented into bite-sized pieces, really, of magic and what's happening, and yeah,
Yeah, I went and
just
listened to some of your episodes and really enjoyed them. So people can go and also just listen to all the ones you already have out. People like
absolutely
to binge, binge the
yes.
podcast. So
Well, um, I'm coming back into binging on the podcasts. It's like, okay, I'm feeling inspired because I don't set myself regular routines. I only share on podcasts and Instagram when I'm inspired.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, probably the best way to stay in contact is to go to my website, starwitchastrology.com, and sign up to my private email list because then
Yeah.
that's where everything gets sort of channeled through. I like that more meaningful connection.
Absolutely. The email list, I love a good email list
Yeah.
myself. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today and sharing all of your wisdom. And I know people are going to find it so interesting. This is completely different in some ways to anything we've experienced on the podcast before. And I'm definitely going to be cheeky and say we should do a part two
I
about
think so.
elementals and some other things because I think that that would also be fascinating.
It
But I
would be
really
fun.
appreciate your time.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, if you're still listening to the end, because I know it's been a long, extended podcast, but I'm really grateful if you have stayed to the end. Thank you so much. And thanks, Hannah. I've loved talking to you.
Oh, we'll be in touch soon for sure. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks.